I came home to find my brother living in my apartment. My parents said it was best for the family. What happened next was rather unbelievable. Let me tell you how it all started. Before then, we share stories like this every day. If you love them, don't forget to subscribe. We are on a journey to our first 100 subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. Kindly leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. We'd love to stay connected. Now let's get into the details of the story. My key jammed in the lock like it didn't recognize me anymore. I twisted it left, then right, tried pulling back gently, then pushing in. Nothing. My apartment, the one I'd spent 6 years designing, furnishing, building from the ground up, had shut me out. I stepped back, stared at the familiar bronze door, then knocked twice. I expected silence. What I got instead was the sound of laughter, footsteps, and then the door creaking open to reveal my younger brother, Ryan, in my robe. "Hey, bro," he grinned, acting like this was a casual hangout, not a break-in. Behind him, the living room was littered with beer cans and game controllers. My couch, the custom suede one I had shipped in from Seattle, had a pizza box on it. I stared, unblinking. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice low, careful. Ryan shrugged, scratching his head like I'd asked what day it was. "Mom and Dad said you wouldn't mind. Said you were traveling a lot anyway, and that space like this shouldn't go to waste." My first instinct was to correct him. Then I remembered the restructuring form Dad had guilted me into signing last month. Said it would simplify taxes. Said it was temporary. I hadn't read the fine print. Now I was locked out of my own life. I stepped back without saying another word. Ryan called after me, asking if I wanted a slice. I didn't answer. I walked down the hall, down the stairs, out onto the cold Chicago street, letting the wind bite into me so I wouldn't feel the heat crawling up my spine. The train ride home, or what used to be home, was a blur. My mind kept flashing to the emails from my parents, vague updates, false reassurances. I opened one on my phone just to see it again. "It's just a shift in paperwork, Tyler. You're still the owner, technically. Ryan needs time to get back on his feet." I laughed bitterly. Ryan had never been on his feet. He'd been carried his whole life, and I'd been the one breaking my back to do it. Tuition, job referrals, even his last DUI bail, I paid for all of it. Back in the rental I used for out-of-town projects, I pulled out the building's blueprints from my cloud drive. I had designed most of the apartment layout myself, back when the complex was first built. I knew its bones, its nerves. And now, I wanted to see every inch of it again. I opened my drafting software, heart pounding not from sadness, but clarity. If they wanted to treat me like a placeholder, then I'd remind them who the architect really was. The next morning, I filed a request for the co-op management documents. Ownership structure, emergency maintenance contact lists, HOA board votes. I wanted every piece. Ryan thought he had moved in. My parents thought they'd outmaneuvered me. But none of them saw the foundation I'd already built beneath their lies. I wasn't going to fight like a son. I was going to respond like a strategist. I spent the week watching their movements. Ryan had already changed the mail forwarding address. My mother updated her Facebook bio to include some sentimental post about family sacrifices. My father sent a short text, "Let's talk when you're less emotional." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I was mapping out every legal move, every ownership clause, every design flaw that could become a pressure point. This wasn't just about the apartment. It was about the years of being expected to give without question. By Friday, I had enough documentation to make them sweat. But I didn't act yet. I wanted them to get comfortable, let their guard down. I needed them to believe I was sulking. Meanwhile, I was designing an updated layout of the property, a symbolic gesture. Every line was drawn not out of nostalgia, but resolve. This place was mine. They had used me like scaffolding. Now it was time to pull the structure down and see who still stood. I pinned the plans to my wall and stared at them. Not just as an architect, as someone who had been robbed of dignity in the name of family. They thought I'd just accept it, walk away, shrug, and keep giving. They didn't realize that architects never forget their blueprints. And I was done being the quiet son. I was building something else now, something permanent. I stood outside the apartment I once called home and thought about all the years I'd made excuses for them. How many times I'd let their favoritism slide. How many quiet betrayals I'd swallowed. Ryan had always been the reckless one, the one who failed upward, rescued by their denial and my silence. I was the son who sent money when they couldn't pay taxes, who skipped vacations to help with repairs. And yet, it was Ryan inside, not me. I remembered being 15, standing in the rain outside my high school gym, waiting for them to pick me up. They never came. Ryan had dented Dad's car again, and they'd gone to handle that instead. When I walked home drenched and shivering, Mom barely looked up. "You're independent," she'd said, as if that were some badge of honor for being forgotten. That night, I realized being reliable meant being invisible, and I carried that invisibility well until now. I sat at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the apartment and pulled out my laptop. I still had access to certain emails, certain contacts, because I'd helped manage the property's books once. I logged into the database for the building's management group, technically a co-op with scattered investors. Through years of penny pinching and silent side hustles, I had money. Not showy money, quiet money, enough to start buying. So I did. Quietly acquiring small, seemingly irrelevant shares under a trust name. The restructuring form I'd signed weeks ago, under the pretense of a tax thing, was the first real slap in the face. I'd asked questions, but Mom's voice had gone soft, pleading. "You know your brother's been through so much." That line again. It had been their justification since he crashed his first car, failed out of college, wrecked 2 jobs, and got dumped for cheating. The world bent for Ryan's potential. I was just the scaffold holding it all up. Emily had warned me. "Your parents treat you like an ATM with a heartbeat," she once said. She wasn't wrong, but I didn't listen, because a part of me still wanted to believe they'd see me eventually. See that I wasn't just useful, I was theirs. But love with terms isn't love at all. And now, as I combed through building permits and contracts, I realized I had no more emotion left to give them. Just calculation. I went to a city clerk's office the next day under an alias I used for freelance property consulting. I requested records, zoning, easements, noise ordinances. Boring to most, but to me, they were chess pieces. I found loopholes, cracks in their so-called ownership. The building had a pending roof repair order that Ryan had no idea about, tied to rising insurance premiums. I bought the debt under my trust's name. If he defaulted, if he so much as missed a payment, I could call the lien. That night, Ryan sent me a selfie from my balcony. "Thanks for the view, bro," the text read. I didn't respond. I stared at the photo for a long time, then saved it. Every condescending smirk, every backhanded compliment, every time he said, "You're too serious, man." Without realizing how heavy being serious had become, I folded it all into a tight ball in my chest and lit a match. I wasn't just going to take the apartment back. I was going to make sure that every inch of comfort they'd stolen from me came with a price. I'd let them build a little kingdom on the foundation of my patience. And now I was going to burn it, brick by brick. But I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't rage. I'd do it with documents, deadlines, penalties. The same way they'd taken everything from me, under smiles and signatures. I began sending polite notices to other shareholders in the co-op, asking if they consider selling. Some ignored me. Others didn't. I spoke to lawyers. I drafted quiet agreements. I stayed late in offices where no one knew my name and signed papers with a steady hand. Revenge wasn't about anger anymore. It was about control. And for the first time, I wasn't asking for space. I was taking it. The more shares I acquired, the clearer the path became. A majority stake would give me voting power over renovations, lease approvals, even evictions. They'd underestimated me for so long. They didn't even know what I was capable of. And when the time came, I wouldn't need to explain. They'd feel it, like the chill of a key that no longer fits. Late one night, I drove past the building. Ryan's car was parked outside. Lights were on. My old TV flickered through the curtains. I didn't stop. I just looked up and thought, I used to call that home. Now, it was just a battleground. No one saw me coming. Not because I was hiding, but because they never bothered to look. They assumed I'd go quietly. Again. But something had changed. I wasn't the second son anymore. I was the storm they never prepared for. The morning the noise complaint file hit my inbox, I knew the cracks were finally showing. For reports, 3 from the same tenant, 1 from a board member. Loud parties. Balcony smoking. A dog that wasn't on the pet registry. All violations under the lease terms. I didn't need to embellish anything. Ryan's arrogance did the heavy lifting. He treated my apartment like it was his personal bachelor den. And the co-op board? They didn't like attention, especially legal attention. I printed everything, timestamps, emails, even a blurry photo of Ryan stumbling into the hallway at 3 a.m. I included it all in a discreet envelope marked urgent and hand-delivered it to the board president's office. Her face tightened as she read. "And who are you to be bringing this forward?" she asked. I gave her the name of the trust that now held a 43% stake in the building. Her tone shifted fast. Suddenly, I wasn't just a concerned former tenant. I was a decision-maker. Weeks earlier, I discovered a dormant clause buried in the co-op's original ownership contract. It stated that if any unit was occupied by a non-authorized tenant in breach of bylaws, the board, if backed by a majority shareholder, could seek an emergency injunction. No hearings. No votes. Just a signed motion and proof of disruption. I already had the proof. And I was about to become the majority. I bought one more tiny share. A retiree looking to downsize. He didn't know the war he'd just helped me win. The next morning, I filed the injunction. Cold. Methodical. Legal. No screaming matches. No confrontation. Just paperwork. Within 72 hours, the board posted an official notice to vacate on my old apartment store. Ryan's voicemail came first. Angry. Slurred. "What the hell is this, man?" Then Mom called. "How could you do this to your own brother?" I didn't answer either of them. They'd spent years carving me out of the family one small insult at a time. Now they wanted warmth. They wanted understanding. When I was cast aside, expected to play the loyal, thankless son, they thought I'd just endure. But I wasn't enduring anymore. I was engineering a collapse. And like any architect worth his degree, I knew, you don't start with the roof. You start at the foundation. By Friday, movers were stacking boxes in the lobby. Ryan wasn't even home. He'd left for a weekend in Miami, thinking nothing would happen without his presence. But presence didn't matter. Ownership did. His name wasn't on a single document. His entire life inside those walls existed by assumption and borrowed authority. The lease violation made it easy. The injunction made it final. Mom showed up during the move. I watched from across the street, standing beneath a scaffold, unseen. She paced the sidewalk, yelling at the building manager, her voice sharp and shrill, like it always got when things didn't go her way. I didn't feel guilt, just a strange quiet, like walking through the ruins of something that was never really yours to begin with. Ryan's castle was crumbling, and I wasn't even touching it. I just removed the support. Later that night, I received an email from the building's legal team confirming the full transfer of the unit back into possession of the trust. I'd regained control, legally, finally, entirely. But I wasn't interested in moving back in. That wasn't the point. They thought the apartment was what mattered. They never realized it was the principle. The memory of being locked out of my own home, of being told to be reasonable, still burned beneath my ribs. I hadn't come this far for walls and windows. I came for clarity. Ryan texted me again. This time, it was just one word. Why? I stared at it for a long time. He wouldn't understand if I explained. He never had. But I typed a response anyway. Because you thought you were untouchable. Because they taught you I didn't matter. Because I let them. I didn't send it. I deleted the draft and let the silence answer for me. What they didn't know, what they'd never even suspected, was that I'd already planned the next phase. The unit was about to be converted. Not into a rental. Not into my home again. But into something else entirely. A co-working space for young entrepreneurs, funded by a grant I'd secured from one of my old clients. It would bear no family name. Just mine. Quietly placed on a plaque beside the door. This wasn't just revenge. It was reclamation. I was rebuilding the narrative they tried to write without me. One brick at a time, from the ground up. And this time, I wouldn't be asking for permission. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the apartment that used to be mine, was mine again, and watched sunlight stretch across the hardwood like it was reclaiming space too. The place looked nothing like it did when Ryan squatted here. It was now smart-lit, restructured, minimalistic, precise. I had invited every top-tier broker I knew, plus a few high-end investors. But there was one invite I'd sent with particular intent. The journalist from the Ledger who'd once profiled betrayals that happened behind closed family doors. She was already there, voice recorder in hand, eyes gleaming with the scent of a headline. "This unit's story is dramatic," she said, as I handed her a glass of champagne. "What made you redesign it?" I smiled politely. "Sometimes, to rebuild something, you have to rip it back to the studs, especially when the rot's been hiding in the walls for years." Her eyebrow lifted. She was getting the hint. The others circled the open layout like hawks, asking about finishes, appliances, square footage. No one saw the storm coming. Right on cue, the elevator pinged. My parents stepped out, dressed like they were headed to brunch. My mother's smile froze as she took in the scene. Strangers milling about, cameras snapping photos, a journalist scribbling notes. "What is this?" she asked, gripping her pearls like they might anchor her. I walked toward them calmly, hands in my pockets. "A private showing," I said. "You know, for the apartment you gave away." My father's jaw clenched. "We didn't give anything away, Tyler. You signed the restructuring." "I did," I nodded. "And then I restructured it again. Legally, strategically, thoroughly." I motioned for them to follow me through the hallway, as if they were just more clients. "Let me give you the tour." We passed the upgraded kitchen. "This countertop? Imported quartz." Ryan scratched the old one hosting parties while I was gone. "Replaced it." I walked them through the redesigned office space. "This used to be a guest room. I converted it. I figured it should finally be used for work, something Ryan never did in his life." Mom glanced at the guests. She was trying to smile again, to project grace. But the cracks showed. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice a little too loud. I turned to her, still smiling. "You didn't need to mean it. You just needed to do it. And you did. Quietly. Just like I did this." They followed me into the main room, where the journalist was now recording everything from a distance. "You always said Ryan needed help, that he needed a leg up. So I stepped aside. I sacrificed. For years. You rewarded that by locking me out of my own life. So I redesigned it." I paused. "And this apartment? It's not part of your legacy anymore." My father looked at the crowd, then at me. "You don't have to do this publicly." I met his stare. "But you did. Every time you praised him while ignoring me. Every time you turned family into theater and made me the stagehand." I motioned toward the group. "Consider this the closing act." My mother's voice cracked. "Please, Tyler, keep it in the family. Let's make it right." "We didn't know." I handed her a brochure. It looked like a listing. "Too late," I said softly. "It's already sold." She blinked, mouth parting. "To who?" I leaned in. "To me. Under a holding company. Weeks ago. You never even saw it coming." The journalist perked up, catching every word. My mother looked at the paper in her hand like it might rewrite the truth. My father looked away. The room was quiet for a beat. Then someone asked about the HVAC system and the brokers resumed their tour. I didn't even need to dismiss my parents. The moment did it for me. As they left, I heard her mutter something about betrayal. But I wasn't the one who betrayed anyone. I just returned the favor, with interest. I stood on the balcony of my new place, 12 stories up, facing west, where the sun melted into the skyline like gold poured across steel. It was quiet here. Not just the absence of noise, but real stillness. No footsteps pacing in the hallway. No voices echoing guilt or expectation. Just space. My space. The walls were blank, waiting for stories that hadn't been written yet. And for once, they'd be mine. Not borrowed. Not gifted then stolen. Built, owned, earned. The apartment was bigger than the last. Brighter. But I hadn't filled it with much, just what I needed. I left the old furniture with the old address, a conscious decision. Some things were too saturated with memory to carry forward. Here, every item had a purpose. Every inch had a reason. It was the opposite of what I'd grown up with: cluttered praise for one child, silence for the other. I kept the silence. But this time, it wasn't punishment. It was peace. Ryan was back at our parents' house. I knew this not because I asked, but because people couldn't help telling me. A cousin mentioned it at a wedding. An old neighbor emailed. Said Ryan looked out of place there, like a man-child pretending to be grown. The irony didn't hit me hard. It barely registered. I'd already boxed that part of my life up and left it outside the door. The key didn't fit anymore. In more ways than one. My mother sent me messages every few days now. Long ones. Full of half apologies and revised memories. We thought you were strong enough to understand. Ryan was struggling. You've always been so independent. It was strange, watching her weaponize my strength. As if my endurance had justified their neglect. I never replied. Not because I wanted to hurt her. But because I finally understood something. Silence wasn't revenge. It was closure. I didn't need them to know what they'd lost. I just needed to stop losing myself to their approval. The sale of the apartment had brought in more than I expected. Market timing, location, the upgrades I'd installed. But I hadn't kept the profit. Not most of it. I donated nearly all of it to a local shelter that helped displaced men. Fathers, sons, brothers who'd been edged out of their own homes by betrayal, addiction, abuse. I asked that the funds be used to build private units. Space to start again. I told the director I'd been one of them once, in a way. One night, I got a text from Ryan. It was short. You didn't have to go that far. I stared at it for a while. Then I deleted it. He'd never understand. And I wasn't explaining anymore. I spent my days designing homes for people who thought they'd never have one. Architecture was never just about lines and beams to me. It was about giving people something solid, when everything else in their life had crumbled. I poured everything into that work now. The irony wasn't lost on me. They took my home, and I turned that loss into a reason to give others theirs. Maybe that's what real revenge was: transformation. I walked through my living room one evening, barefoot, wine in hand. The windows were open. Somewhere in the city, a saxophone played softly, carried by the wind. I stopped at the edge of the balcony and looked out. Below me were lives I'd never touch, problems I'd never know. But above me, around me, everything was mine. I said it out loud, just to hear it in the air. They gave it away like I never mattered. So I took everything that did. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on something that wouldn't collapse beneath me. If you connected with this story and want more like it, about betrayal, quiet revenge, and the kind of healing that doesn't look like victory, subscribe to the channel. I share stories that cut deep and stay with you. See you soon in the next one.